If you stepped into an ordinary household in 1942, you wouldn't find people waiting to be rescued by systems, brands, or convenience. You'd find families quietly competent, not heroic in the Hollywood sense, but prepared, disciplined, and useful. Governments assumed this baseline competence because they had to. Total war meant supply chains snapped overnight, cities burned, men disappeared to the front, and civilians were expected to adapt without complaint. These weren't optional hobbies. These were survival skills baked into daily life, taught early, practiced often, and passed down without ceremony. What's striking is how many of these skills have vanished in less than a century, even though the pressures that created them are returning under different names. Let's get into what families were expected to know by 1942. Not in theory, but in practice, and how those same skills still matter if you care about resilience today. Every household was expected to manage food scarcity without panic. By 1942, rationing wasn't a shock, it was a fact of life. Families knew exactly how to stretch calories without malnutrition. This meant understanding energy-dense foods, protein substitutes, and seasonal eating long before those terms became trendy. Housewives and children alike knew how to make soups from bones, stews from tough cuts, and bread without relying on white flour. They saved cooking water, reused fats, and understood how fermentation and pickling could preserve nutrients for months. The practical application today is straightforward. If you can't plan a week of meals without visiting a store twice, you're vulnerable. Practice cooking from staples like dried beans, grains, root vegetables, and preserved meats. Learn to reuse leftovers intentionally rather than treating them as waste. Wartime families didn't ask what they felt like eating. They asked what they had and how long it needed to last. Basic repair skills were considered part of being a functioning adult. Clothing was rationed, tools were scarce, and replacement parts often didn't exist. Families repaired what they owned until it physically failed. Sewing wasn't a hobby, it was maintenance. People could patch, darn, resize, and repurpose garments repeatedly. Shoes were resoled, furniture was tightened, glued, or braced. Even children learned how to fix simple breaks rather than discarding items. Applied today, this means rejecting disposable culture entirely. Learn to sew a button, patch a tear, reinforce stress points, and maintain footwear. Keep basic hand tools and know how to use them. Wartime households didn't outsource competence. If something broke, fixing it was the default response. Fire, heat, and light were managed deliberately, not casually. Fuel shortages meant families tracked heat usage with precision. Fires were banked, not left to burn freely. Rooms were closed off to conserve warmth. Candles and lamps were placed strategically, not for atmosphere, but efficiency. People understood airflow, insulation, and timing because mistakes meant cold nights or wasted fuel. The modern parallel is energy literacy. Know how to heat one room effectively. Understand passive insulation, methods like heavy curtains, draft blocking, and thermal layering. Learn safe alternatives for light and heat if power fails. Wartime families didn't wait for outages to figure this out. They already knew. First aid and home medical care were honestly non-negotiable knowledge. Doctors were scarce, overwhelmed, or quite often just unreachable. So families treated burns, cuts, infections, and fevers right there at home. They understood wound cleaning, splinting, fever management, and basic hygiene, even under stress. Women especially were trained to act calmly and decisively because, well, hesitation cost lives. Today, this means real first aid competence, not just a kit collecting dust in a cupboard. Learn how to clean wounds properly, recognize infection, manage dehydration, and stabilize injuries until help arrives. Wartime households assumed no one was coming quickly. That mindset, honestly, still saves lives. Children were trained early to contribute meaningfully. By 1942, children weren't sheltered from responsibility. They gardened, collected scrap, minded siblings, and understood why discipline mattered. Skills weren't postponed until adulthood. They were introduced as soon as hands could manage them. Applying this now means teaching competence, not just obedience. Let children cook simple meals, mend clothing, manage small budgets, and understand why preparation matters. Wartime societies didn't infantilize youth. They prepared them. Gardening and small-scale food production were strategic skills. Victory gardens weren't symbolic, they were essential. Families knew soil, seasons, pests and preservation methods. They saved seeds, composted scraps and rotated crops because failure meant hunger. You don't need acres to apply this. Grow something edible. Learn preservation methods like drying, pickling or cold storage. Even a small harvest builds skill and confidence. Wartime families didn't wait for perfection. They planted anyway. Mental resilience and routine were cultivated deliberately. Perhaps the most forgotten skill is psychological discipline. Families maintained routines during air raids, shortages and loss. Structure created stability. People worked, ate, rested and planned despite uncertainty. This wasn't denial, it was survival. Today, resilience looks like maintaining skills, routines and calm when systems wobble. Limit panic consumption. Build habits that function under stress. Wartime families understood that morale was a resource. These skills weren't extraordinary in 1942. They were expected. The tragedy isn't that the world was hard. It's that we forgot how to be capable. If you want to rebuild that competence, start small, start practical, and start now. If this kind of deep, grounded history matters to you, subscribe to Iron Age Instincts, share this with someone who values resilience, and keep these skills alive by using them.